I worked at a beginner outdoor retreat about 2 hours from the nearest real city, the kind of place people booked when they were tired of screens, noise, traffic, and their own routines. They came in on Friday with expensive bags, clean boots, and big ideas about resetting. By Monday they had sore legs, 100 photos, and the same problems waiting for them at home. For me, it was just work. Solid work, though. I liked knowing the trails better than the guests did. I liked watching people show up tense and leave a little looser. I knew how to keep a group moving, how to calm down the nervous ones, how to joke just enough without becoming their friend. That part mattered. People came and went all season. If you got too personally involved with every guest, the job got messy fast. So I kept things simple. Then she showed up, and from the first hour I could tell she wasn't there for the same reason as most of the others. She came in with the second shuttle just before dinner. Dark jacket, small bag, no extra chatter. While the others were already doing that first awkward thing where strangers act overly open because they all paid to be there, she just signed in, thanked the front desk girl, and stepped aside like she wanted as little attention as possible. She wasn't rude. That was the first thing I noticed. She answered when people spoke to her. She listened. She joined the group walk before sunset. But she never pushed herself into the middle of anything. It felt deliberate, like she had come there to get away from noise, not add to it. I first talked to her near the equipment shed while everyone was picking up water bottles and light rain shells for the next morning. "You've done this kind of thing before?" I asked. She looked down at the boots in her hands and gave a small shrug. "Not really. I'm just pretending I know what I'm doing." I laughed. "That already puts you ahead of half the group." That got the first real smile out of her. Small, quick, but real. "Good," she said. "Because I was hoping nobody could tell." "I can always tell," I said. "But that's literally my job." After that, it was little things. A short conversation after breakfast when she asked which trail was the least embarrassing for someone who didn't want to slow everybody down. A quiet minute near the fire pit that night when she said she liked hearing trees instead of traffic. The next day, while the rest of the group was taking pictures by a lookout point, she stayed back near me and asked how long I'd been working there. 3 years, I said. "And you don't get bored?" "Sometimes with the people," I said. "Not with the place." She looked out over the ridge and nodded like she understood that better than I expected. What made me notice her wasn't that she was dramatic or flirtatious. It was actually the opposite. Talking to her felt easy in a way that didn't happen much with guests. No performance. No trying too hard. Just these short conversations that somehow felt a little more private than they should have. By the third day I was looking for her without wanting to admit it. That was the day everything changed. We had a guided route planned for late morning. Nothing extreme. Just a longer loop through a wooded section, then out toward a narrow rise with a good view over the valley. I'd taken groups through it dozens of times. The weather was clear, the ground was mostly dry, and everyone was in a good mood because they'd already started acting like outdoors people after one decent breakfast and 2 easy walks. She was near the back of the group, which didn't surprise me. I slowed a little so I could keep an eye on the beginners and make sure nobody drifted too far. At one point she came up beside me and said, "I think I'm finally getting used to this. To walking. To being somewhere I can't hear my phone." I looked at her. "You turned it off." She gave me a look. "I'm not a complete maniac. I just stopped checking it every 6 minutes. That's progress." She smiled again, and that was right when I heard movement off to the left. Not the normal kind either. Heavier. Fast. I threw my arm out automatically to stop the people closest to me. A few heads turned. Then a wild boar pushed through the brush about 20 feet away, low and tense and way too close for comfort. The group broke almost instantly. Someone yelped, somebody else stumbled backward, and all the calm I'd spent the morning building disappeared in 1 second. Stay together, I snapped, louder than before. Back up slow. Don't run. Of course, 2 people immediately started backing up too fast anyway. The board jerked forward, more startled than aggressive, but that didn't matter. Panic had already spread. I grabbed a trekking pole from one of the guests, stepped toward the side of the trail, and shouted hard enough to turn its attention away from the group. It hesitated, kicked up dirt, then veered off toward the brush again. That should have been the end of it. But behind me I heard her cry out. I turned and saw her on the ground just off the trail, one hand braced against the dirt, face tight with pain. In the scramble she'd stepped wrong near a sloped patch of loose rock and gone down hard. When I reached her, she was trying to push herself up and couldn't. Don't, I said, crouching beside her. Just stay still a second. I'm fine, she said automatically, then grabbed my forearm the second she tried to move her foot. Okay. No. I'm not fine. The rest of the group had gone quiet by then, all of them staring, breathing too fast. I checked the area, made sure the animal was gone, then looked back at her. Her ankle was already swelling through the side of her boot. You're not walking out on that, I said. She looked at me, still holding my arm, and for the first time since she arrived, all that calm distance was gone. Okay, she said quietly. Then don't let me fall again. That was the moment it stopped feeling like routine. Up to then, she had been another guest. After that, she wasn't. And I wasn't just the guy leading the trail anymore. I was the one she had to trust when everything suddenly felt unsafe. After we got back, I helped her to the main lodge and sat her down in one of the chairs near the dining room while one of the staff brought the first aid kit. She tried to act normal about it, which only made it more obvious how much it hurt. I'm okay, she said for maybe the 4th time. You're saying it like you're trying to convince me or yourself. That got a tired half-smile out of her, but when I loosened the laces on her boot and checked the swelling around her ankle, she looked away and gripped the sides of the chair. Bad? She asked. It could be worse, I said. But you're done with trails for now. She let out a slow breath through her nose. That sounds expensive. I looked up at her. Your ankle or the missed hiking? The whole idea that I came all the way out here and ended up getting carried out of the woods. You were not carried. You know what I mean. I did. And the truth was, I also knew what came after something like that. Once the fear wore off, people either got embarrassed or emotional. Sometimes both. I wrapped the ankle, told her to keep weight off it, and helped her to her room upstairs. It was one of the smaller rooms, simple bed, narrow window, a bag half unpacked on the chair. Nothing personal spread around. It looked like someone had planned to stay only long enough to disappear for a weekend and then leave clean. At the door she hesitated, one hand on the frame. Thanks, she said. That's part of the job. She looked at me for a second too long. That's not what I meant. I nodded once and left before I made that moment stranger than it already was. But after that, I kept ending up at her door. At first I had reasons. Ice pack. Food from dinner because walking downstairs was a bad idea. A clean towel after somebody at the lodge forgot to bring one up. Then it stopped feeling like errands and started feeling like I just wanted to check whether she needed something. The first night after the hike, I knocked around 9. She opened the door leaning on the wall. You know there are easier ways to annoy guests. I came to see if you were still alive. Disappointing answer, she said. Yes. I held up a plate from the kitchen. You barely ate. She moved aside so I could come in. You people are intense here. We pride ourselves on forced care. She sat on the edge of the bed while I set the plate down on the small table. Up close she looked different than she had outside. Less composed. Not messy, just tired in an honest way. Does it still hurt? I asked. When I forget not to move it, yes. That's a strong system. It's failing so far. I laughed, and she did too, then the room went quiet in a way that didn't feel awkward. That was the first long conversation we had alone. Not dramatic. Just real. She asked if I always stayed at the retreat during work blocks. I told her mostly yes. Easier than driving back and forth. I asked what she did in the city, and she answered without giving me one of those polished job descriptions people use when they don't want to be known. She worked too much. That was the simplest version. Her phone had been running her life for months. People expected things from her all day, and even when nobody was messaging, she kept waiting for them to. That was why she came out there. Not for adventure. Not for some cheerful group reset. She just needed a place where nobody could reach her quite so fast. I was starting to get angry at sounds, she said. What sounds? Everything. Notifications. Traffic. My building elevator. My own phone buzzing on a table. So you came out here to hate birds instead? She smiled down at the blanket. Birds don't ask for follow-ups. That line stayed with me. After that, seeing her became part of my day. I'd help her downstairs in the morning or bring breakfast up if her ankle was too stiff. I'd walk with her slowly out to the porch so she could sit in the sun while the others went off to do whatever was on the schedule. When the group had evening activities, I'd usually find a reason to circle back and check on her after. Once, late at night, I found her sitting alone in the lounge after everyone else had gone to bed, her injured foot propped on a chair, a blanket around her shoulders. Can't sleep? I asked. She looked up. Too quiet. That's new. I know. I sat across from her. The lights were low, the kitchen was dark, and for the first time since she arrived, it didn't feel like guest and instructor anymore. It felt like two people hiding from the end of a day. She told me more that night. Not everything, but enough. Enough for me to understand that the distance I'd noticed in her wasn't her personality. It was pressure. She had been holding herself together too tightly for too long, and the retreat had cracked that open just enough for air to get in. At one point she looked at me and said, "I don't usually do this." Get chased by wildlife? She gave me a flat look. You know that's not what I mean. I did know. I just liked hearing her laugh. When the retreat ended, I helped her get her bag to the shuttle. Her ankle was better, but not fully right. Everybody was saying their goodbyes, trading numbers they probably wouldn't use, promising to send photos nobody really needed. She stayed close to me while people loaded up. This is the part where we act normal, right? She said quietly. What would abnormal look like? You tell me. The driver called for final boarding. She looked at me, waiting. I should have kept it clean. Wished her well. Let it become one of those strange brief things that feel bigger than they are because of where they happened. Instead I said, you can text me when you get back. Just so I know the ankle survived the trip. She studied my face for half a second, then nodded. Okay. She texted that night. The next day too. Then it turned into calls. Not constant, not fake and overdone, just regular. Easy. We started telling each other small things first. Then bigger ones. She would call walking home from work. I'd talk to her while stacking gear after a group finished for the day. Some nights we stayed on the phone so long I'd realize the lodge had gone completely quiet around me. Distance should have made it thinner. Somehow it made it stronger. Every call felt chosen. Please like this video and subscribe. It really helps me out. A couple months later she came to visit me. That was the point where I stopped telling myself this might just be leftover adrenaline from the retreat. She was in my town, in my place, moving through my kitchen in socks, standing on my porch with a mug in both hands like she belonged there more easily than she should have. Nothing about it felt forced. Nothing about her felt uncertain. When she left after a few days, she stood by the station with her bag and said, "I have to get back. Work's already waiting for me." It sounded practical. Adult. Real. And I believed her. Because by then, I believed almost everything about us. After her visit, everything got stronger for me instead of settling down. That was probably the point where I should have slowed myself down and looked at it more carefully. But I didn't. When someone starts fitting into your life that naturally, you stop checking the edges. You stop asking whether you're seeing the full picture. You just start building on what feels good. That's what I did. We kept talking every day. Not out of obligation. Not because either of us was trying to keep something alive with forced effort. It just happened. I'd wake up and see her name on my screen. I'd finish with a group and already know I'd probably hear from her that night. Some calls were long, some were 10 minutes, but even the short ones had weight. It felt like she was part of my routine now. Part of my thinking. I started making room for her without saying it out loud. I kept her mug on the drying rack a couple days longer than necessary after her visit. Left one of the blankets folded the way she had used it on my couch. Small things. Stupid things, probably. But that's how it gets real in your head. Not through speeches. Through habits. A few times I almost asked where exactly this was heading, but every time I got close, she said something that made the question feel unnecessary. One night she called while I was outside locking up the storage shed near the main trail. "You sound tired," I said. "I am. Bad day." She let out a breath. "Just too many people wanting things from me." "You can come back here," I said, half joking. There was a pause, then she said, softer, "You know I would if I could." That kind of line stays with a man longer than it should. So I let myself believe I wasn't imagining this. I let myself believe the distance was the only real problem, and distance felt like a practical problem. Hard, but not impossible. Cities can be crossed. Jobs can change. Plans can be made. None of that scared me. What scared me, if I had been honest, was wanting it too much. The surprise trip came out of that feeling. I didn't tell her. I told myself that was because I wanted to do something bold for once instead of always living inside calls and messages. I pictured her face when she opened the door. Shock first, then that smile she got when something hit her unexpectedly. I thought maybe I'd take her out somewhere in her city, maybe we'd laugh about how reckless it was, maybe it would turn into one of those moments you remember as the point where everything became official without anyone needing to say it. The drive there was long enough for me to build a whole future in my head. By the time I reached her street, I was running on nerves and adrenaline. It was a quiet place. Clean sidewalk, parked cars, trimmed hedges, the kind of neighborhood that looked settled. Not flashy. Just established. I slowed down, checked the number she had given me before, and parked across from the building. I remember stepping out and feeling that weird mix of excitement and panic all at once. Then I looked at the mailbox. Her surname was there. And right next to it, the same surname with a man's first name before it. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at something so obvious it almost felt unreal. My brain tried to do that useless thing where it searches for easier explanations even while the truth is already standing in front of it. Brother. Relative. Old listing. Anything. But the place itself was already answering me. 2 pairs of shoes by the door inside the glass entry. A jacket that clearly wasn't hers hanging near the hall. The kind of details you clock in 1 second when your whole body is suddenly on alert. I still rang the bell. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me needed the last piece. Maybe because turning around before that would still leave room for doubt. I heard footsteps. The door opened. A man stood there, maybe a few years older than me, relaxed in the way people are relaxed in their own home. He looked at me with that polite, neutral expression people use when they think you've probably got the wrong address. Yeah. That was it. One word. He didn't need to explain anything. Behind him I caught a glimpse of the hallway, framed photos on the wall, a bag on the floor I recognized because she'd brought it to my place. That hit harder than seeing him. Not because it was bigger, but because it joined the two worlds in the ugliest possible way. For one stupid second I considered asking for her. Instead I said, "Sorry. Wrong place." He gave a short nod and closed the door. I just stood there. No fight. No speech. No dramatic moment where everything gets laid out cleanly. Just me on that doorstep feeling like I'd been dropped out of my own life for a second. Then I turned around and walked back to my car. The drive home was the worst part because there was nothing to do except replay everything with new meaning. The retreat. Her face when she said she needed quiet. The late calls. Her visit. The way she moved around my place like she wanted to be there. Every memory stayed the same and changed completely at the same time. That's what really messed with me. I didn't know how much of it had been real for her. Maybe some of it was. Maybe a lot of it was. But I knew one thing for sure by the time I got home. She had let me build something on missing information that would have changed everything from the start. And once you understand that, you can't go back to being the same man who left for that trip in the first place. She didn't call that night. She didn't call the next day either. At first I kept checking my phone without meaning to, like my body still hadn't caught up with what I already knew. Then that faded and turned into something worse. Not hope. Just that dull, heavy feeling you get when your head keeps replaying the same few minutes and can't stop. I went through my usual days at the retreat, showed people how to lace boots properly, led short routes, smiled when I had to, corrected posture, pointed out trail markers, did everything I always did. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. It was strange how fast the memory of her started splitting in two. There was the version I had been living with for months. The woman who had come to the retreat needing air. The woman I had helped after the fall. The one who sat with me late at night and said things she made sound honest. The one who came to my place, drank coffee on my porch, left a hair tie on my sink and laughed when I found it later. Then there was the second version. The real one, or maybe just the fuller one. The woman who had gone home every time to a life she never told me about. The woman who let me build plans around a blank space where the biggest fact should have been. That was the part one couldn't get past. Not even that she had hidden someone. That she had let me care in complete ignorance. 3 days later, she finally called. I was outside near the storage cabin when her name came up on my screen. For a second I just stared at it. Then I answered. "Hey," she said. Just that. Soft, careful, like we were coming back from a minor disagreement instead of the kind of thing that ends a man's trust in his own judgment. I didn't say anything. She breathed in on the other end. "You went quiet. I came to your house." Silence. No fake confusion. No quick question. No attempt to pretend she didn't understand what I meant. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower. "Okay." That one word made my grip tighten around the phone. "Okay." I said. "That's it? What do you want me to say?" The calm in her voice hit me harder than anger would have. I looked out toward the tree line and felt that same stunned feeling I'd had on her doorstep. "I want to know when you were going to tell me." Another pause. "I don't know," she said. That answer felt more honest than anything else she could have said, and I hated it for that. "So you were never going to," I said. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." For the first time, I heard strain in her voice. It wasn't that simple. I laughed once, with no humor in it at all. "It looked pretty simple from your front door." She let that sit there. Then she said, I didn't plan for this to happen. That would have pulled me in before. A week earlier, maybe even a few days earlier, I might have grabbed onto that and tried to sort through it, tried to save some part of what I thought we had. But I was too far past that now. You still let it happen, I said. Her voice got quieter. Because what I felt with you was real. I closed my eyes for a second. That was the worst part. I believed she meant it. I think some part of it had been real for her. Maybe that was why she sounded so steady. Maybe that was why she wasn't begging, wasn't crying, wasn't trying to erase it. She had already arranged it in her head in a way that let both things exist at once. Then she said the thing that finished it. We don't have to stop. She wanted me to stay, knowing she had a husband. Would you have walked away like I did, or stayed? Let me know in the comments. I opened my eyes. What? We don't have to end this, she said, more clearly now. Not unless you want to. I didn't answer. I honestly think my brain stalled for a second. She kept going, and each word made it colder. I'm not saying it's ideal. I know it isn't. But what we have doesn't disappear just because you know everything now. Everything now. Like honesty was just a delayed detail. You want to keep this going, I said slowly, with me knowing you go home to your husband. She exhaled. I'm saying I'm still here. I'm saying I still want you in my life. That was the moment the last of it died. Not at her house. Not when the man opened the door. Here. Right there. Because up to that point, some stupid part of me was still trying to sort out whether we had been real and ruined, or fake from the start. But this told me exactly what place she had made for me. Not a future. Not a choice. Just a hidden lane running beside her main life. And maybe she thought that was enough. Maybe she thought what we had at the retreat, and after, and during her visit, gave her the right to offer me that like it was still something valuable. Maybe for some men it would be. Not for me. No, I said. She went quiet. Then, carefully, know what? No, I'm not doing that. Her breathing shifted. You're angry now. I'm done now. That's not the same thing. It is for me. For the first time, she sounded close to losing control. So that's it. I looked down at the dirt near my boots, at the same ground I stood on almost every day, and felt weirdly steady. Yeah, I said. That's it. She didn't speak. Neither did I. Then I ended the call. I stood there another minute with the phone still in my hand, waiting for something dramatic to hit me. Rage. Relief. Anything big enough to match the mess of the last few months. But what came instead was simpler. I just knew I was never answering her again. After that, I went back to the lodge, washed the dirt off my hands, and got ready for the next group like I always did. People still arrived carrying too much from the lives they wanted a break from. They still left with photos, sore legs, and whatever truths they were ready to admit to themselves. And me, I stayed where I was. Only now I knew one thing for sure. Sometimes the worst mistake isn't trusting the wrong person. It's mistaking being chosen in private for being chosen at all.